And we are back. Welcome back to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, episode 117, presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. And now we are going to go behind the grind with the Doc himself. There's some good Docs out there. Doc Emmerich, Doc Holliday, and Doc Roto out in the house. So, Doc Roto, how are you doing? You ready for this? You ready to go behind the grind?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
All right. So some people may look at me and consider me kind of intense when I'm talking here right now. But hey, I love to get hyped before the show. I have my kind of thing I like to do, my pre-pod poo and turn on some tunes. That's what I'm about. That's how I get ready for the show. Now, if you were coming out to close the ninth inning here in a baseball game, if you were coming to the ring for a WWE contest, the Doc is in the house. What music is getting queued up to bring you down?
I'm going to admit I'm old, but I love me some Rocky. So my song is Gonna Fly Now, right? That's my song, right? That I don't want to say that's my jam because I'm not going to sing it for you, but that song, when I hear that, I get pumped up. I'm ready to go. I feel like I'm ready to take on Apollo Creed.
That's usually the follow-up question is to sing a few songs. I mean, you go through those Rocky soundtracks, The Eye of the Tiger, dun, 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 and you're ready to go. It's ready. You're hungry. You want at it. Let's go. Major, what do you got next?
Oh yeah, man. You have some coffee today. I like it. But we all know sports is important growing up. Did you play any sports? Who were your favorite teams? Who are some of your favorite players?
Yeah, great question. So I played a lot of tennis growing up. I played basketball growing up. I played volleyball in college. So I coached volleyball for years afterwards. My son's a tennis player, so we're a big sport family. In terms of, look, I was an only child. And so to me, when my parents weren't home, the TV was. And so I'd watch everything from, random TV shows, Dukes of Hazzard, Love Boat, all those dumb shows, to watching sports, watching football, watching baseball, watching basketball. There wasn't a sport that I didn't know. I was on the 2-minute drill on ESPN. I tried out for that, was on one of the episodes for just knowing a lot of sports trivia. So to me, sports was just part of what I knew was like a fabric of my life, so growing up north, watching the Yankees, going to Knick games, going to Giant games. It was a big part of who I was or who I am.
I think what people don't understand is how good of a babysitter the television really was back in the day. I mean, you couldn't get in trouble. Like, I don't know about you, but my TV had 1 to 2 channels tops. There was no way you were seeing something that's inappropriate or whatnot. Like, you could get on your phone now. I mean, and if you're lucky, that channel would be clear. I mean, you might have to grab those antenna, those ears, kind of adjust them as you go. There's something to be said about that. And
I'll tell you a funny story about that, though. I'm at my grandparents' house, and they didn't have Sports Channel. And it was the Islanders playing the Capitals, and it was 3 overtime game. And they literally had, when the snow on there, so you're trying to look at it. And I'm literally watching 3 overtimes of this game in the middle of snow on the TV, and I could barely watch it, but it was totally worth it.
But you still watched it, right?
I watched
it. Would that have been the La Fontaine? Was that game? The big announcement?
I don't know if it was that game. It was Kelly Hrudey was in goal. And it could have been, but it was 4-3 in overtime, in 3 overtimes. It was intense.
Kelly Hrudey, former Medicine Hat Tiger, right where I am at right now as we speak. So a little bit of connection there.
Very cool.
I love how you mentioned volleyball because I played volleyball growing up too. One of those sports. I watched volleyball today. The game is completely different. There's no gimme points like there is now. I mean, it's all rally point now. Back when I was playing, there was no rally point. Those games could go for hours and hours and hours. So they got the rally point thing going, just how that game has changed. I mean, now let's kind of transition here because we're having a lot of fun, but I want to know, I always love a good story. I always like to have a good heartfelt type story when it comes to the shows. I like to have a way to educate people. I've seen the video, but for those who haven't, kind of talk about how fantasy sports saved your life.
Yeah, so I used to suffer from polycystic kidney disease like my grandfather did and my mom does. And I was heading down a dialysis road and losing all my kidney function. And I told you I have no brothers or sisters. So I needed a kidney. And I went and I put it out there into the Twitter universe and, told my wife, I think this is what I'm going to do. And we shot a video, we put it on Twitter, And I decided I'm going to put it on Sunday at like noon, figuring right before the football games, people would see it. Well, that wasn't such a great idea, because when I went to bed that night, I think we had 400 views on the video. And I looked at her and I said, I don't know, maybe I misjudged it. I don't know. And so, we were talking whether she was going to donate a kidney, which she didn't want to do. Not that she wouldn't have, but we have 2 kids and we didn't want to risk it with the kids, and we couldn't both not be there for our kids. So the next day comes, and out of nowhere, literally all my friends in the fantasy industry, and I can name you a few, I can name you a bunch, but from Jeff Manns to Bob Harris to Mike Clay to Ron Chandler to Brad Evans to all these people, put it out there, retweeted it. And by the middle of the day, we had close to 140,000 views.
Wow.
And by like 4 o'clock the next day, I literally had about a dozen people come to me and offer a kidney. And there's just no words that I have. There's just no words that I have to how thankful I was, really, truly thankful. So what happened was I did it at Jackson Memorial Hospital down in Miami. And so what happened, you send your information, I'm not allowed to know about it, right? These people came to me and I said, look, here's the information, you do with it what you want to do. So, because you're not supposed to know. And then what happened was that one person, I don't want to say his name, I don't know if that's the right thing, but he was a public safety officer. He was half my age, from Michigan. And he came forward and he had said to me, he goes, Doc, I saw your video and I knew that this is just what I needed to do. And it turns out that outside of a blood relative that our blood matched as close as could be, wow, which is amazing. And he came down during COVID. This happened in May of 2020 was when I had my kidney transplant, that he came down from Michigan in the middle of a pandemic and did this. I have no words other than hero. I mean, no words to describe what he did for me and my family. And so that is true. The fantasy sports did save my life.
I think that just really is a testament of what this community truly is. And those that aren't in the community, I don't think they quite understand what it means to be part of this. And it's very inclusive to everyone, whether you're an analyst, whether you're a fan, whatever that might be. I mean, it's always included. We've seen this at the expo. I joke about it. I've never been touched by as many dudes as I have when I went to the fantasy football expo. I mean, so much hugging going on, but that's true. You look at these charity leagues, Scott Fish puts these things together, all the money that gets raised for charity. And this is just another one of those amazing examples of the fantasy football community coming together for something there. So, and we are all very thankful for this individual in Michigan to be able to help you come on this show, if that's the right way to put it there.
No, it is. And I'll tell you a funny story here. So for years, I made no money in the fantasy industry. I mean, not a penny. And my parents used to give me grief. I can't believe you're doing this. You're an idiot. I can't believe you're working for no money. But I always believed in what I was doing, right? It didn't matter. I loved what I was doing. And, to my dad's credit, after my surgery, he said to me, he goes, look, I was wrong. Fantasy sports saved your life, and I couldn't be any happier. So, I mean, obviously that, I trusted in what I wanted to do. And like you said, Matt, great people in our industry. We really have just a very even though we may have all our own websites and we're all doing our own thing, we still know how to come together and we still support each other, right? I want your site to be successful. I want my site to be successful. I want us all, there's enough out there for us all to enjoy it. And I think that's the beautiful thing, that we come together over sports, which brings people together.
Wow, man, I don't even know if we can go on with the show. Should have ended on that right there. That's a great story. But talk to us about a decision that changed the trajectory of your life. And you can't say marriage, birth of a child, and you can't say posting that video.
Sure. Here's a story for you. So when I was in college, I went to the College of William and Mary, and I was the student government president my senior year. And one of the members of the board of visitors was a lady named Janet Hill. Who's Janet Hill? She was Hillary Clinton's college roommate, but she's also Calvin Hill's wife and Grant Hill's mom.
What?
So you might have heard of them before, right? So she says to me, Doc, what are you doing? And she called me Doc back then. But she said to me, what are you doing after graduation? And I said, I want to be working for your husband. And her husband was Calvin Hill, who was the assistant general manager of the Baltimore Orioles. And she opens up her pocketbook, gives me his card. I never called Calvin Hill. It is probably the biggest regret of my life. And I wonder what would have happened. Would I have been a general manager today? Would I have been working for the Orioles? Would I be doing something in some sports capacity? So now I'm looking in on sports in a different way as an analyst, working at SiriusXM, doing my own site at drroto.com. But what would my life have been like had I made that call? Would I be actually part of an organization? So is it a regret? Well, I don't want to have regrets in life because I'm pretty happy now with what I do. But I do look back at that point, Major, and say, what would have happened if I had called Calvin Hill?
What stopped you from calling him? It was just like...
Yeah, so the truth was there's two elements to that. One, I knew I wanted to go to law school. Don't ask me why. I thought this was a brilliant idea. It wasn't. I practiced law for about 2 minutes and I left it. And the other thing was, I'm going to be honest, I didn't want a job where I was like sleeping on a floor or sleeping on a couch. Now I appreciate the grind. Back then, I guess I wanted it too easy, right? Maybe if he was going to make me his assistant and I had an office, I'd be great. But to and that's why there's a guy in our industry, Pat Mayo. Pat Mayo literally slept on the floor and did all sorts of amount of work for a minimal amount of money, busted his butt. I have the most respect for Mayo because he earned everything he has. And back then, I didn't want to do that. Now, maybe I would have. So it's interesting that you say that. Like, I just didn't feel like that was where I wanted to be when I knew I could have gone on to law school to just do stuff like that.
Right. Man, that's an amazing story.
Well, you probably went to college there. I think it was Seton Hall or whatnot. You probably did plenty of sleeping on the floor in college. I mean, we've all done our fair share there. But hey, if you made that call, there is probably 0% chance you would have been the 2011 FSWA Newcomer of the Year. I can almost guarantee that. So we've got the Newcomer of the Year back to 2011, kind of when that fantasy analyst, Dr. Roto kind of thing took off. Now, what are some of the biggest changes now compared to back then?
Well, that's a great question. So I'll tell you real quick how that all began. My good friend Mike Cardano had a son who played baseball, and his son played baseball with Lou Mayon's son, and Lou Mayon was the owner of Roto Experts. So all of a sudden, Mike and I were doing blogs together, and we ended up all working for Lou and Roto Experts. So here I was, close to 40 years old, and I'm the Newcomer of the Year. Are you kidding me? I mean, like, come on, I'm an old guy already. So back then, though, it was all articles. There was no podcasts. So Roto Experts was on SiriusXM every morning from 7 to 11, and I was on for a couple hours, in the morning. I worked with Scott Engel and Adam Ronis, and we had a great staff. We had Mayo and Nando DeFino and Jake Seeley and all these terrific guys, but we were all writing. None of us were doing podcasts. None of us were doing videos until the very end. Toward the end of my time there at Roto Experts, we started to do more videos. Now, nobody writes anymore. Everybody's doing podcasts. Everybody's doing videos. So it's just become more of a multimedia industry that we're in, where back in the old days, if you didn't know how to write, you couldn't be in it.
Yeah. At what point did you decide that you wanted to make fantasy football more than just a hobby? Was it right out of college?
No, it's a great question. So originally I had a website. It was called Roto RX. And I was your prescription for fantasy success. And it didn't really take off. I was on a UPN newscast, and I got a little in the industry. Nothing ever happened, so I put it away, and I just played in leagues. And it wasn't until Mike called me up and he said, "Hey, buddy, and this is a funny story, by the way." And he said, "Hey, buddy, do you want to do a blog together?" I said, "Well, yeah, I used to be do Dr. Roto, where I used to give fantasy advice for people." He goes, "That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard." Right? 24 hours later, he calls me up. He goes, "I thought about it. It's a genius idea. Let's do it." Right? And so people would write for advice, and I'd give them fantasy advice. And that's how it all began. So it was, out of nowhere, did I dream about being a fantasy football analyst or fantasy sports analyst? No, I used to compete in leagues and win them. I was playing fantasy sports, and I didn't realize I could have a job in the industry doing it as well.
So I got to know this for my own well-being. I know you said your wife, she's a Doc Roto herself. Where did your Doc moniker come from? Like, we know you went to law school. We know you went to William and Mary there. You mentioned that. did you go into practicing? I know I've joked around being Doc every once in a while too, because my initials are MD, and it's kind of a fun thing to throw out there from time to time. But where did Doc? We know Roto came from, but where did Doc come from?
So look, I mean, I used to have a personal training license, so I used to know the body, and I used to be the injury expert for Roto Experts, but I wasn't a doctor per se. But what happened was it all started with Roto RX, right? So Roto, we all knew. And then I came up with RX, right? Like I said, your prescription for fantasy success. And then it just became Dr. Roto. And then when Mike and I hooked up with Roto Experts, could you imagine Dr. Roto at Roto Experts? I mean, that was like perfection right there. Couldn't have worked out any better. And it just took off. And, then, everybody knows me as Doc and Dr. Roto. And, now, it's great to be known in the industry because I've been around it for a while, and that's how people know me.
Did you ever think that injury analysis would take off the way it has today? I mean, now it's everywhere and anywhere. Like Stefania Bell absolutely kills it every single time. She's been on the show. We love her, and she nails it every time with ESPN. But there's so many injury analysts out there. I won't call them experts because it's an injury stuff. It's always things can change and they kind of go. But back in 2011, I have to imagine you were probably one of the first ones who was breaking down injuries at that time.
It was me at Roto Experts. It was Stefania, and it was a guy named Jeff Stotts who was at RotoWire, and we were doing the injury news. And so what happened was, and may find this funny, I didn't want to be pigeonholed into being the injury expert. I like talking about injuries, and I was able to talk about injuries because of my personal training background, but I wanted to be more than that. I wanted to be a guy who could talk about all sports. So when I had the opportunity to host on SiriusXM, yes, I did talk about some injuries, but I really wanted to branch out into being an analyst. And now every site has a football doctor. And it's funny that I'm partnering on drroto.com. We have a deal with Dr. David Chow and his Sports Injury Central site. And, he's one of the more outstanding doctors in the industry. And, in terms of covering that. And I think we need that because we want the information. And the doctors, when Dr. Chow says, I've seen the film, I've seen this before, I've worked on these injuries, there's no more credibility than that, right? Same with Stefania, same with Jeff. So people really understand these injuries, and it gives you an advantage in your leagues.
I know Dr. Chow there, he goes back there with the Chargers. I mean, he's got that medical history with the Chargers there. Now, obviously, you've been doing this XM radio. You got your website there. You've been doing probably hundreds of thousands of podcasts and interviews throughout your career, either guest appearing or people you've actually talked to. What were some of the more memorable interviews that you've been a part of?
I'll give you my worst interview, and I'll give you my best interview.
Here we go, Major. We're coming up.
My worst interview was Buster Posey from the San Francisco Giants. And I prepared for this interview. I really went over it. And every answer was, yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. What am I going to do with that, buddy? I can't work with you there. Come on. Throw me a bone. Help me out. One of the best interviews I had was with Eddie George. Eddie George is got a great personality. He's a great guy. I'm a big Survivor fan. His wife was on the show. So I would talk to him about, could you be on the show like Taj, whatever. So that, of course, when you can connect and, I don't know if you know Lenny Melnick. Lenny is a legend in the baseball industry. And Lenny had this knack of before the interview would start, he would bring up something that he could connect with the person that we were interviewing. And when they did that, those barriers dissipated immediately. And it became, so it was like with Eddie George, hey, can you go on Survivor? And now all of a sudden, Eddie George and I are just having a conversation, which is a whole lot better than, me asking a question, him giving an answer. And when you do that, it makes for a really great spot.
Yeah, that's cool. Matt does a really good job of that on this show. I got to give you your credit right there, Matt. But Doc, I need you to shoot straight on this one. If you were not in the fantasy world, what will you be doing?
Teaching. I love working with kids. I tutor. I do college guidance. I've worked in the classroom for years. I've worked as a head of school. I've worked as a director of college guidance. I love working with high school age students. I like being somebody who can mentor them and help them, guide them in the right direction. It's really one of my passions. I get to say, I'm not your rich friend, but I'm rich in that I work in the industries that I love, doing things that I really enjoy, making an impact.
Right.
Speaking of impact, you've talked about your children or your love for tennis. I know your son's a tennis player as well. Who wins, you or your son? This is a kind of a two-part question here. Who's better, you or your son right now?
So my daughter played on the golf team. My son plays on the tennis team. My daughter has a much better golf swing than I do, except she's a crappy putter. So she can get down to the hole in 2, and then she 4-putts. So I'm usually beating her. My son can beat the pants off me now in tennis. He's got a forehand that I can't even see half the time. He's really good.
Nice.
That was the second part of the question. Who's the better golfer, you or your daughter? I got my research here. I mean, when I play golf, I make sure I get what I pay for. And I pay for the whole dang course. I'm going to use the whole dang course. That's from left to right. I'm using the whole
dirt,
thing.
the water, everything, right?
Everything. It's all up for grabs.
So I love golf Florida, as I get older. As I get older, I love golf. I love it. It's just one of those things. You're outside, you're with nature. It's most of the time relaxing. And I don't even use a driver. I don't. I'm one of those few guys I don't use a driver, because if I do, it goes this way or that way. But if I use a 3-iron, it usually goes straight. So I don't hit it far, but I hit it straight, and I can live with that.
See, and I love the big swing, but I might have to change my golf game if I come down to Florida, because I don't do gators. I ain't going anywhere near the water when I go down there for that kind of golf. That ain't happening. That ain't about me. I ain't about that life. I'll put it that way.
This is wrong.
So, yeah, it's late. I'm like a coffee member. Like,
no, if there's water, there could be a gator in Florida. That's no joke.
No, that's true.
That is 100% right.
No, that's really true.
I seen what they did to Chubb. I ain't going down like Chubb did. There's no way that's happening. So the next question is, I mean, we know what this community is all about, and we know what fantasy sports is all about, but what has fantasy sports taught you about yourself?
I think fantasy sports has this great way of helping you connect with others, even like trade negotiations. Who are you as a person? Are you the type that's going to rip somebody off? Are you going to make a fair deal? Will you do anything it takes to win? Are you able to win with class? Are you able to lose with class? I mean, have you threatened to quit leagues because you didn't like the rules or whatever that is?
Right.
I think it just shows who you are as a person. Look, if I lose a league, I lose a league. I don't want to lose a league, but I mean, I deal with it and I figure out how to come back better next year. I try to be smarter next year than I was this year. So I think it just helps you in so many ways. I love that fantasy sports, especially DFS. I love setting lineups in DFS. I love drafting in fantasy sports. I like using my brain in that way. Roster construction, dare I say, excites me, right? I love being able to put a team together and looking back going, I really did a great job there, right? Taking my quarterback in round 11 because I waited allowed me to get some good running backs and good receivers. So I think that it's adds patience, so you're not so impulsive, being patient, being thorough, being smart, and knowing how to just have fun.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with that anymore. I mean, that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah. And you spoke earlier a little bit about some of the relationships in fantasy that you made. But name some of the people who helped you along the way in your career.
So I'm going to do both parts of their major. I have made so many great friends in this industry, and I am very lucky and that I have. They're not just fantasy friends; they're real life friends, right? They've turned over into friends that I call to this day, talk to, not just on Twitter, in real life. So let's see, influences. I'll start with Mike Cardano. I got in this industry with Mike from day one. I'm going to have to say Lou Mayon, who gave me my first opportunity at Roto Experts. Scott Engel and Adam Ronis, who I worked with on the radio, along with Corey Parson. Those three were integral into my radio days. Matt Deutsch and Steve Cohen and Rob Tuesday for giving me the opportunity on SiriusXM to do what I love to do. Scott Atkins, Ian Ritchie, Joel Cox. When I left Roto Experts, I went to Scout Fantasy, and that was, somebody paid me money because they believed in what I did. And, now basically everybody who I work with at, drroto.com, all my friends there, from the people from my NASCAR guys to my football guys, to everybody who believed in our vision of trying to produce great content and make a community. And, I can name them all, but I mean, I could, but it's just everybody who believed in me to do that with me meant a whole lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. And this is like my favorite question. We do this every week. What's some good advice for those of us trying to make it in the industry?
Believe in yourself, do your homework, be prepared. You're going to have an opportunity. So Mike said this to me. He goes, Doc, I'll get you on Sirius, but what you do there when you get there is up to you. And I'll say that to everybody. You'll have your opportunity. What are you going to do with that opportunity once you get it? What are you going to make of it? Put your time in, put your dues in. Nothing comes easy. I didn't make $1 for 5 years in this industry, not $1, right? But it was the grind, guys, right? You know about the grind. So it was about the grind because I loved what I was doing and I believed in what I was doing and I believed in myself. So believe in yourself. And here's another thing that I think is critical. Believing in yourself is not just in your abilities, but also in your picks. Stand by your convictions. Just because somebody else says that they like Nick Chubb and you don't, so maybe you don't like Nick Chubb. That's up to you. That's okay. You dare to be wrong. I always say I'm a visionary. Why? Because I see things before they happen. I may be right, I may be wrong, but I stand by what I say. And for the most part, I've been very fortunate that I'm more right than not. I've had a lot of victories and I feel pretty good about that. But I believe in what I stand for. I believe in the players. I believe in my analysis. And I think that's critical in this industry. You got to go all in because if you don't, somebody else will.
Great advice.
And hey, you know what? It's okay if you don't like Chubb or Chubbs or whatever you want to call him, because the Gator down in Florida, he didn't like Chubbs either because he got his hand, okay?
Exactly.
So hey, it's okay if you're not convicted, if you're not believing in Nick Chubb. But what you should believe in is the doc himself, Dr. Roto. Head over to Dr. Roto, Dr. Roto, dr.roto.com and get your one-stop shop there for all your fantasy needs. We're talking football, baseball, golf, hockey. I've seen hockey on there. That's something you don't see on a lot of fantasy sports. Hockey, that's where I'm at up here in the Great North. We love ourselves some hockey, so I'll be checking that kind of stuff out. I mean, when you've been around participating in fantasy football since like 1990, newcomer back in 2011, you've learned a thing or two. You've got a few little prescriptions on that notepad that you're willing to hand out, and we're glad you're able to come on the show here today and hand a few more out. Now, what do you got coming up here the next little while? We know the combine's coming up, so we'll have some rookie talk over at Dr. Roto. What else you got coming down?
Yeah, so we're really working on the draft. I just literally wrote a Dynasty article just before I came on with you guys. Going to be talking about best ball and Dynasty. And, what we're also going to do is we're building out communities by division, right? We want people talking. You like the AFC West? We've got an AFC West, page on our site so you can hash it out. We've got a Discord channel for it. I think people love the community. They love talking about their teams. They love talking, who's the better quarterback, Dak Prescott or Jalen Hurts? Right? Who's, that's a conversation that people like to have. We want to be part of that conversation. We love the passion. We love people who love their teams. And so we're really pushing that forward. Also, we're doing our MLB draft guide. Lou Landers and my team is doing an amazing job with our draft guide. There will be baseball. It just may take a little while, but hopefully they'll come to their senses and sign a deal.
Well, for Dr. Roto, for Major Caldwell, that's at Way Too Major FF. Hey, I'm Matt Donnelly. This has been the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, episode 117, Behind the Grind with Dr. Roto himself. Keep this conversation going. Hit every one of us up on Twitter. Hey, we're here to talk. We're here to get this conversation going. Just because it's the off season doesn't mean it's no season here when it comes to fantasy. There's plenty to talk about, and we are here all season long. So head over to dynastyvipers.com, head over to drroto.com, and head over to fantasypoints.com. Enter that promo code VIPERS22 and get 10% off that subscription. Another great website, another one-stop shop for all your fantasy football needs. And hey, we're back here each and every week. Hit us up on any kind of podcasting platform, you name it, Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Stitcher, MySpace. We might even have something on MySpace. I don't know, but I'm sure we got something there. I think I still have my profile from 2009 one back on MySpace still. So you can check that out. That's probably still up. And of course, hit the YouTube up, smash that like button. It's like right down. See where the dock is? It's right down there somewhere. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next week. Take care now.